All right. So here's the deal. I've tried to, advertise this as much as possible, but in case you missed my announcements, right, today and several other days are probably going to be a bit more loosey-goosey going forward as we switch over into the project. So I would like to remind you that your project pitch is due to me by the end of the day today. I've already received a lot of them, which is great. I've started going through them this morning, and I haven't gotten very far yet. I've only had time to watch a few so far, but they've all been great so far. So I'll continue to take a look at those, and I'm hoping to get back to you quickly on that. Hoping to watch as many as possible tonight, and hopefully get them all finished by tomorrow morning at the latest. So you'll be hearing back from me very quickly on that if you haven't heard back from me already. And then please go ahead and get started, right? Like your iteration number 1 is due in 2 weeks. So please don't wait until the 28th to start it. You've already got a plan. Start knocking it out. Get that plan done, put some work into these projects, and let me know if you need any help. As far as today goes, as I mentioned, I'm open to help out with anything. In fact, there are a couple of people who I know were in office hours this morning, who were asking some questions about stuff. So I'm happy to take any questions that people have about homework assignments or the project, and we can spend some time doing that. I mean, if that takes the entire time, then I'm happy to spend the entire class doing that. If I run out of questions, then I plan to keep working on the Quizmaster app and just practicing the skills that we've been working on. So, if you're here and you have questions, stick around. I'll get to as many as I can. If you're here and you don't have questions, you're welcome to just chill and listen to the answers to these questions. And hopefully I'll eventually get to do some Quizmaster work. Yeah, it's, up to you to spend this time however you see fit. So let's take a peek. I've actually already got somebody messaging me about one of the homework assignments, assignment number 3, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about, what I think is probably the trickiest part about assignment 3 for a moment, to give people a little push in the right direction. I mean, I'm looking at stuff like, so the trickiest part about assignment 3 is finding the commit that has happened, that you're supposed to grade, right? If the student has committed multiple times, maybe some of those commits happen before the due date, some of them happen after the due date. We want to find whichever commits took place right before the due date, right? So, I'm used to, I encourage you to Google, and Googling skills can actually be pretty tricky. But what are we actually trying to do? I'm trying to find a commit at a certain period of time. So that's kind of the idea that I would search for, right? Find commit at, certain time, something like that. And actually, the page that I was hoping to see didn't quite come up here. Get checkout commit at date. There we go. Get checkout commit. Here we go. This is the page. It's already purple and everything. So the command that I am, thinking about is, there's a couple options here. I think some people have tried this. I'm more used to this one. This is the one that I'm familiar with, which is actually a command within a command. And this is something that trips a lot of people up. So the person who's asking me questions about this right now, I think, the problem might be, if I want to execute the command and capture the output, I have to use backticks. This is not an apostrophe. This is not a single quote. It is a backtick. That is the syntax there. It's the key that's in the top left corner of your keyboard. This tripped up a lot of people. So, double check that. Make sure that's not what's tripping you up. If that's something that, if this is a command that you're having problems with. And then, the branch over here, right, has to match the branch that we're looking for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But Yeah, this was definitely the trickiest part of assignment 3, both figuring out what you needed to do and the syntax. If you're interested in what this is actually doing, right, this is going back to look at the list of revisions. That's what the rev list is indicating. It's basically saying, go find the top one on the list that happened before this particular date. So you would just change this date to be whatever date you care about. And then, yeah, that's basically it. So I think that will address most of the. Is there a difference between using the backticks and using $ parentheses? Yes, I believe so. The $ parentheses is actually a more modern construct. In fact, little surprised to see backticks here. You actually see the $ parentheses more often than the backticks these days. For, I'd say, 9 out of 10 purposes, they probably are equivalent, but there are some subtle differences between the two that, for the most part won't affect you. And I don't even know what they are off the top of my head, but for the most part, they won't affect you, but they do exist. Rules regarding making corrections to homeworks. No, you submit it. There are no rules. I don't accept resubmits. If you think there's a grading problem, we can have a private conversation about that. But I don't do resubmissions. You've got like all the flexibility in the world when it comes to the due date. So take your time and do it right if that's what matters to you. To do number 8 on assignment 4. All right, sure. Let's take a peek. Yeah, if you have questions about homework assignments or project stuff, feel free to shout them out in the chat. I'll keep taking those for as long as I can. If you have questions about your specific situation, like if you want me to look at your code specifically, I can handle those types of questions more towards the end of class. I don't want to do that when I've got 36 people chilling in the room. I want to keep things more general. But if you have, you want me to look at your actual code, send me a message on Discord with a screenshot or something if you want, or hang around till the end and I can spend some time doing that at the end of class if we need to. All right, assignment number 4. Let me pull up the code for that. Do I have it loaded in Eclipse already? I'm not sure that I do. Is this it? No, that's 131 assignment 4. Darn it. All right, let me go find it. Let's see, where would that be? That would be in the which class are we in? This one. And it's actually called assignment 5, I think. Or no. Yeah, here it is. Okay. Boop. There's some stuff actually in this assignment that we haven't gotten to yet, so it's possible that it's possible that to do number 8 is referring to something that we hadn't discussed in class before. Get total calories. Oh yeah, get total calories. In fact, this is one of those things. I know what this one is. There's a rule that is mentioned. I mean, while we're on the topic, I can mention this, right? There's a rule that's mentioned in the chapter on objects, I believe, chapters 6 and 10 from the text. That's the content from the text that I'm going to be going over in class on Wednesday. And to do number 8 refers to something that is mentioned in one of those chapters. So I would encourage you to, if that one's confusing to you, come back on Wednesday. We'll talk about it. And we'll talk about, as I've mentioned before, I'm still planning to go through the solution of assignment 4 in class. So we'll do that at some future date as well. But for now, if you're interested in to do number 8, go read these chapters in preparation for Wednesday's class, and you'll probably find what I'm looking for. Another question, if you came up with an alternative to finding the last commit, is that fine? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's almost always going to be more than one way to solve a problem when it comes to computing, right? That's pretty typical. So I'm not going to be picky about that. that kind of stuff. Yeah, what other questions do you have? Like I said, if you, I would definitely appreciate keeping things somewhat general right now. If you want me to take a look at your code, contact me privately on Discord, or stick around to the end and I can do that kind of stuff. But if you have general questions about assignments, or you want me to review a topic that we talked about in the past, if you have questions about the project, now is a great time for all that stuff. Yell them out in chat, or you can raise your hand, and I can unmute you if you want to talk on the mic. Let me know. I'll wait a moment just to see if there are any more lingering questions out there. And if there are no questions that pop up in the next moment or so, then I'm going to switch over to Quizmaster and keep coding, which is what I've been looking forward to today. Actually, I've been thinking about this app a little bit. Okay. We won't be talking about it this Wednesday. No, it'll be either next Monday or next Wednesday. Probably for assignment 4. I haven't decided which one yet, but probably next Monday or next Wednesday. What should you do for backend saving user data? Well, you don't have to do anything if you don't want to. I mean, that's not something that I would expect students in this course to know how to handle. At some point in the future, it's very likely that I'll do a demonstration in class about how to write data out to files. Not because I expect you to use that on your project, but just because I do expect some people to want to use it on their project. And so I'm happy to, go over that in class as a way of exploring that particular topic. But what should you do? It's up to you. If your project absolutely cannot go without some sort of backend, then you may want to rethink what project you're doing. These are not meant to be, the apps that we're doing in this class are going to be fairly simplistic compared to the ones that you're used to using on a regular basis, right? And that's okay. That's intentional. Any more questions? Any more questions? All right. Awesome. Well, let me know if you think anything. In the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and switch over and do some work on my Quizmaster app. So I've got about an hour left in class. I'm probably actually going to stop closer to 3:30 just to see if I'll probably stop closer to 3:30 to see if there's any more questions about homework assignments and stuff. But let's go ahead and keep working on this app. I'm probably just going to pick out one of the use cases, one of the user stories that we've already discussed and just implement it and see where the wind takes us, right? Like I don't have any destination in mind. I'm just doing more practice, getting more work done on this project. So I see, some of this functionality seems like it's going to need to happen sooner rather than later, right? So I look at stuff like a teacher should be able to add questions to a quiz. A teacher should be able to create a new quiz. I mean, I kind of feel like I need to be able to create a new quiz before I add questions to it, right? Like it seems like I have to do this before I do this. So this seems maybe like a good place to start. This would, basically send us down the road of creating a quiz object, right? To hold question objects that we developed previously. So let's start with this one, and then maybe if there's time, we can take a look at this user story as well. They're related to each other, so they should be, fairly straightforward. And this one's actually, is this one finished? Yeah, we'll call it finished for now. I may revisit that a bit later, we'll see. So got a couple of them done already. We're going to do this one next. So first things first, I need to pull up my command line. I really, really prefer doing Git stuff on the command line if I can. Although if you like doing it better in Eclipse, then by all means, I'm not going to complain about that as long as you are able to do what you need to do. So let's go into the directory that's got the Quizmaster code. Here it is. And even though I'm working on this project by myself, right, I'm still going to pretend as though there are other people working on this project and make sure to do a poll before I do anything, right? And I need to be more specific here. If you see this message saying you need to be more specific, all right, what do I want to pull? I want to pull from the origin, and then what branch do I want to pull, right? Development. Okay, make sure development branch is up to date. Looks like it is, so that's okay. Then once I've done that, now I can actually create a new branch for my own work on this particular feature. So I'm going to create a new branch, quiz creation. Oops. It's -B, isn't it? Not -C. Sorry. My fault. All right, I'm now on the quiz creation branch, right? Wait, was I on the development branch before? I hope I was. Oh, shoot, I forgot to double check that. Was I on the development branch before? I think I was. Yes, I was. Okay. Whew. I should have double checked that. Made sure that I was on the development branch first, but that's okay. We're all right. Branching is all good. So now I can go over here to my Quizmaster application and right. I've got a set of tests for questions, but I don't have any tests for quizzes. So, test-driven development says first thing we should do is create a failing unit test, at least one failing unit test, right? Now, this user story, I think, is a bit interesting in that the user story says I should be able to create a new quiz. So how do I test that? Creating new things we do in code by calling the constructor. So the way that this is written, the way that this user story is written kind of implies that I should be writing unit tests for the constructor. But in practice, unit testing constructors is typically considered unnecessary. Constructors usually follow a pretty formulaic approach, right? We're just setting instance variables. That's the role of the constructor. So writing unit tests for that process is usually considered to be unnecessary. So, what else is there for me to test here? What else is there for me to test? I'm trying to think about that. Create a new quiz. I mean, it could be that maybe creating a new quiz and adding questions to a quiz, right? Like maybe these should be kind of merged together. Maybe this is actually what I'm working on. Maybe these two are related enough that I could merge these two user stories together. So in that case, maybe both of these are in progress. In other words, maybe this is just a poorly worded user story. That's not going to be uncommon, right? Like that's not an uncommon thing to have happen, to have a user story that you look at a bit later on and you're like, maybe that's actually not a good user story. Maybe that's not a good user story for me to include. Let me put this one back. I might revisit that a little later. I'm going to switch gears and do this. And so now, am I on the right branch? Quiz creation. Maybe I should do a different branch instead. I know I'm being a little bit, it sounds like I might be a little bit nitpicky or, being a little bit fiddly here, but these things matter, right? Like we're here to talk about these kinds of distinctions and the effects that they have on our programs. So let's do add question to quiz. Let's do this instead, because this is something that I feel is more easily testable. Okay, so all right. Oops. All right, cool. Yeah. So I do want to make some unit tests for, oh gosh, I named this wrong. This should be quiz tests. Okay. So let's create some tests here to check and see that we can properly add a question to a quiz. How are we going to verify that, right? What information is a quiz going to provide to us to let us know that we've properly added a question? Well, I would assume that a quiz could tell us how many questions it contains, for example, right? So I should be able to create a quiz, and it should be able to tell me that it contains, 0 questions. And then I should be able to add a question to that quiz, and then it should be able to tell me that it's got 1 question. And then I should, maybe even be able to, should I be able to retrieve questions from a quiz? Well, that's possible, but that's not what this user story is talking about. So even if that is something that we care about, that's not something I need to care about right this second. Let's write a test for adding a question. Okay. So first thing I need to do is I need to create a quiz. Now I have to decide on, okay, when I create a quiz, what information does it need? What information do I want to track about these quizzes? Probably needs to have some kind of a name, right? Sample quiz. What other information do we need to track about our quiz? I know it's probably going to have some sort of container full of questions, but is that something that we need to worry about with the constructor? Maybe not. Anytime I create a quiz, right, it's probably going to start empty with no questions in it. So, if that's the case, if we're just trying to keep it simple, this is about as simple as it gets. Create a quiz. Yeah, I mean, yep. Okay. Then let's go ahead and after I create the quiz, I would also need to create a question. So for that, I can actually refer back to my question tests and grab one of these questions to reuse here. Quiz. For the sake of good naming, you see I was already reverting to my old bad habits, right? Single letter variable names. The book says that's no good. So here's a question, and then I'll just add this. Quiz under test dot add question. This line looks like a mouthful, right? These are some long variable names, but there's no doubt about what this line's actually doing here, and what those variables represent. And now the final step of our unit test is to write an assertion. So we're going to assert that quiz under test dot get number of questions equals 1. There should be 1 question on that. 1 question on that quiz. If I wanted to be a little bit more thorough, perhaps, right, I could put another assertion in here before the question gets answered. Then this should be 0, right? I should be able to see this value change after a question gets added. Okay. So you'll notice this test fails. This test won't even compile because I don't have a quiz object yet, but let's go ahead and create that. Since we know that's what we're going to need. And so far, all we have is a string to represent the name of the quiz. And now we can create our constructor, which again is going to follow a pretty straightforward formula. And now we have to implement the functionality to add a question to this quiz. But we also need to, add functionality to tell us the number of questions this quiz contains as well. So we're going to need some kind of a container here, right? So if we're thinking about the containers that are available to us, especially the ones that are available to us in 131, we've got, array lists, or what we saw. We saw sets, we've seen, and then in 131, I mean, they make a very, very brief mention of some data structures like maps, hash maps, or trees. Although we don't do a lot with those data structures in 131, they are typically mentioned briefly. And so we need to make a decision now about which of those structures is going to serve our purpose on this particular for this particular application. Sorry, my brain just froze there for a second. So what matters, right? What matters in regards to this quiz? Because we need to think about the properties of the data structures and which ones map up to what we want to do. I think a list, an array list, is a structure that people kind of naturally gravitate towards, right? And for a quiz, it kind of feels like it would be an okay data structure. Lists are ordered. Quizzes usually have questions in a certain order, although oftentimes it's possible to randomize at the order that the questions appear in on a quiz. Maybe that's an option. Maybe that's another user story that we should provide later on, right? The ability for a teacher to specify whether this quiz should randomize the ordering of the questions or not, or keep it the same. Another thing to consider is, do we want to allow the same question to appear on the quiz more than once? Do I want to allow duplicate questions? Because, there are some data structures that can help us with that. A set would not allow duplicates. The problem with using a set, though, is that it's not ordered. So if we do care about the order of our quiz, then a set is not going to provide that functionality to us. So I think, honestly, there's a case to be made for either an array list or a set here. I think either data structure could be used, right? Some of it's going to depend on your own personal preferences. How do you personally, philosophically see this quiz working, right? Which data structure do you personally feel most comfortable using? I bet most people would probably pick an array list here. Array list of question objects, right? I think this is probably what most people would feel most comfortable with here, but like I said, I do think there's an argument to be made to use a set instead of a list here as well. I think that could happen. That could also work. And so since I've added another instance variable, the constructor, right, is responsible for initializing it. So let's go ahead and create that new array list. This will create an empty array list for us, right? And now we can actually do, what we came here to do, which is to implement the functionality for adding questions and determining the number of questions. So we'll make add question question. I don't know if the text would consider this to be a good name or not, right? I don't know. I think so if I'm remembering correctly, right, the text does say situationally, short, concise names like this might be considered appropriate. Certainly not an uncommon thing to see. And anyhow, the functionality here is pretty straightforward. Questions.add. Right? Like it's not complicated. And in terms of the number of questions that we've got, that's just going to be the size of our list. So I wrote this test. This test was failing. If I import my quiz object, I believe now I should at least be able to run it. I don't see any errors. Let's run it and make sure that it actually passes. And it does. It does pass. I had 0 questions before. Now I have 1 question. Before we declare this user story as being complete, though, we should think if there's any other things we need to be aware of when it comes to adding questions to a quiz, right? So one of the things that we could talk about is this idea of duplicates. Do I want to allow duplicate questions to appear on the quiz or not? I feel like most people would probably say you don't want to have the same question appear more than once. I'm trying to think of a reason why you might want to have the same question on there more than once, and I'm just not really able to think of one, right? But regardless of where you end up on the topic, if you want to alter your code to reflect the decision that you made there. Let's say that I want to change my code such that I know I'll never have the same question on there more than once. I think it would probably be better to specify that as a user story, right? And add that as a task on your to-do list. So the proper way to do that, I believe, would be to come back here and create a new card that says, a teacher should not be allowed to add the same question to a quiz more than once, right? Like that's a user story. So we've now encapsulated that as a user story, and we can tackle that much the same as we tackle our other user stories, right? So this keeps our approach consistent for everything that we add to this project, which I think is important. Consistency is good. Okay, I hope that what I said made sense. And so, would I write a test for that now? Not necessarily. I would make another branch for that and follow the usual process. Are there any edge cases that we need to worry about here, though? Right? Like, is there anything that we need to consider in this particular, when it comes to adding a question to a quiz? I'm not sure that there is. We may think of some edge cases later that we need to pay attention to, but for now, I don't really, I mean, this feels pretty good to me. So I'm going to go ahead and commit and push my work, and then I think I'll have time to do at least one more user story after this. So we can do that in a second. While I'm, following the commit and push process, if anybody, again, I'd just like to remind you, I'm happy to take questions. So if anybody has questions about project stuff, homework stuff, if anybody has questions about what I'm doing, feel free to holler. If anybody has any suggestions for user stories they'd like to see me add, or, what do you want me to work on next on this application? Feel free to let me know that as well. I want you to, you can have some input on what's going on here if you would like. But let me go ahead and back up and finish off this user story. So I want to add the question tests. I want to add Java. We need to be a little careful, right? I don't want to add these .class files. That's not something that we want to add, right? I'm not sure how this got modified. That's a little concerning to me, but I'm going to go ahead and add add those things. And now I can do my commit. What branch am I on right now? I am on the add question to quiz branch. Yada, yada. Push that, and then we would wrap up by going to here, making a new pull request. I'm going to check the branches this time, so I don't try to push to master like I've done like every other time. All right. And then my teammates would, take a peek, make sure I didn't do anything totally dumb, and then I could go ahead and merge. There we go. Is handling the perspective of a student versus a teacher something that will come up once you've finished all the functionality of the app? Well, it already has come up. If you recall our work from last week, we spent time developing this menu that has, a teacher side and a student side. In practice, there would be, login information and password protection and all that fun stuff. That's overkill. That's overkill for what we're doing in this class. But we already see that. We already see that distinction having an effect on our code. We have different sections of the menu depending on whether you're a student or a teacher. And actually, now that you have mentioned it, you have, I think, you know, kind of uncovered a gap in what I just did, right? Like, where is the functionality in the menu to accommodate adding a question to a quiz? So is that feature truly done? I haven't actually, right? I haven't actually finished it in the sense that there's no action on the menu. It's just blank, right? I just left these placeholders in here instead of doing the actual work. And part of that also illustrates, I think, a gap in our design of this. Where do the quizzes live, right? The questions live on the quizzes, but where do the actual quizzes live? Where do the quizzes themselves live? So we need to have some way of managing our quizzes. Does that make sense? Like if I want to come back to a quiz that I've created and edit it later, right? Like I need to have some kind of a container for my quizzes as well. So we need to have some kind of a quiz manager is kind of the point that I'm making here, right? And so I think there's another layer that needs to be incorporated before we can really tie all these pieces together. I need to have some sort of quiz management piece. So having a quiz manager object I think would be a good idea. It's going to allow me to search for quizzes, retrieve quizzes, whatever I need to do to access the actual quiz information. And so that could be another user story, right? That could be yet another user story. So what would in fact, probably multiple user stories related to the quiz manager, right? A teacher should be able to view all existing quizzes on the quiz manager, right? Might be an example of a user story that you could add, or a teacher should be able to create a quiz from the quiz manager, right? Something like that. Or add a new quiz to the quiz manager. Or, I mean, I want to get a little bit careful when I start mentioning objects in my code. That becomes problematic, right? Quiz manager is a coding concept. It's not, or is it? It's also a piece of my app, right? I guess the distinction there is a little bit hard to make, perhaps. But anyway, so if I wanted to, tackle some of these pieces, right? We could do that as well. Complete. In fact, we'll have to at some point if we're gonna do this properly. And so these two are somewhat similar. This one is kind of a UI piece. So testing this one, anytime that I have a user story that's just based off of viewing data, right? Like that's going to be a tough one to test. It's gonna be a tough one from a unit testing perspective. This one though, I should be able to test without too much trouble. So maybe I'll spend the next chunk of time doing that, and I might tackle this one as well. We'll see. At some point in time, once we get kind of the groundwork laid, it should be very easy for me to then just start picking off these user stories and cranking them out. You can see I've already nailed 3 of them just here in class. All right, let's go ahead and do this one real quick. I'm going to go ahead and go back to my command line here. And even though I just did this user story, I'm jumping into another one. I'm still going to go back to the development branch, right? That's where we always begin. And then I'm still going to do a pull. Because even though I've done, oh, I'm sorry, it's origin development. Because even though I am, right, even though I just did this not too long ago and I just made these changes, right, it's possible that somebody else could have done something, and I just want to be as safe as possible. So now that I've pulled the most recent changes, which these are the changes that I just made, by the way, the result from the merge of the pull request, now I can actually, start my process again. Check out the branch. for the new feature. So it's going to be, which user story are we doing again? Oh yeah, adding a new quiz. Okay. Go in here. I'm about to develop a quiz manager. So I'm going to go ahead and make a new unit test case for my quiz manager. And honestly, it's going to feel mostly the same to what we just did. The quiz and the quiz manager will eventually, I think, diverge a bit more. But for right now, what is the quiz manager? It's just a container of quizzes. Like, it's quite literally what it is. It's a container of quizzes. So we have the same question that we were just faced with. What's the right container for the job? Do we want to allow the same quiz to be in there more than once? I mean, maybe, maybe not. I think it's going to boil down to the same too, either a linked list or a, or a set, right? I think a linked list probably is going to, or an array list is probably going to make a good deal of sense here. So, okay. So I'm going to go ahead and create a quiz. In fact, I can borrow some code from my other tests here to help me out with this part. Do I have a quiz manager, right? What input parameters does a quiz manager need to do its job? Honestly, right now, I can't think of any. Later, that may change. I have some ideas about how that may change in the future. But right now, for what we're doing, I can't think of any parameters that this quiz manager needs to do its job effectively. So we won't worry about that. We'll say quiz manager under test.add quiz under test. And then the last piece of my unit test is going to be assertion statement, where that's equal to 1. And I could do like I did before and do the check before I add the quiz. Whoops. Wrong button. And set it equal to 0. I know it. I mean, these user stories do feel very similar to each other, right? It's a little unfortunate, but not particularly surprising. I promise we'll see some divergence once we get into more of the meat of this project. But for now, I'll just make a simple quiz manager object. Suppose I need to import array lists, huh? Okay. And I need whoops. And then finally, okay. Once I do the import statement for the quiz manager, I should be able to test this, and I should have yet another user story in the books. Let's see how this is working here. Looks good. Okay. So we'll do the same thing that we've been doing. No surprises. It's looking like I'll have time to do at least one more user story after this. We'll try and do one that's maybe a bit more exciting, perhaps. Although, actually, let me pause for a second, right? There's something I think to consider here in terms of design, right? May or may not be considered a bug. I just added a quiz with no questions to the quiz manager. Is that okay? Do I want to allow a quiz with no questions to be, under the management here? I think it might be okay, but if you disagree, I hope you see how you could maybe write a test to check for that, right? I shouldn't be able to allow a quiz with no questions to be added to the quiz manager. You could write a check for that, right? That's something that you could check for. Anyhow, now that I've got my quiz manager, I can. And so let's think too, right? Are we truly done, or do we need to start thinking about how we're going to tie this into our menu as well? Because that's something that I didn't think about enough with the prior user story, right? So how does this quiz manager fit into our menu class? And can we do any testing for stuff like that? Well, I think that, we see things like, here's an option for creating a quiz. So I should be able to create a quiz here and then add it to the quiz manager. Editing a quiz, that's something different, but we already implemented this user story, creating a quiz, and we have this quiz manager now. So maybe we could actually take this placeholder out and actually do the specific work necessary to add that quiz to the quiz manager. I feel a little dubious about doing this now. I think there's an argument to be made that this should have been done with the prior user story that we did, perhaps, but it is something that needs to be done. And I don't think it's the worst thing to do it alongside of this user story. It is somewhat related, right, to the user story. So let's go ahead and create instance variable up here for our quiz manager. And then I'll have to, initialize that here. Okay, and then I will need to come down here. And when I create a quiz, right, I'll have to get the necessary information for the quiz, which is just the name. So I'll have to, grab some input here. So right. Then I'll create a string to hold that. And we'll use the same scanner object that we used in the past. I've got this scanner object called in. Oh no, it's called keyboard in. I apologize. Have this scanner object called keyboard in. And this time we're not dealing with an int, right? This one deals with integers down here. We're actually dealing with strings right now. So what's available to have us get a string back? I see next line. I like that. Let's take next line. Okay. And now I can create the quiz. Now I can add the quiz to the quiz manager. And so now we're actually utilizing the quiz manager here in the way that it's intended, right? To store all of the quizzes that get created. And eventually when I get around to doing the other menu options here, like editing, listing the quizzes, taking quizzes, etc., I'm going to have to also go through this quiz manager object, right, to access the quizzes, the information for the quiz that's being taken or whatever the case may be. I guess the one final question that remains, I mean, first, let's make sure our tests still pass, right? We should be able to run all of these unit tests and see them pass, right? And I don't think I don't expect any of them to fail. There's still not enough complicated stuff here for us to be too terribly concerned about. Where did my... Okay. But we should also try going through the menu, because if you recall from last Wednesday's class, writing unit tests for user interfaces like this menu stuff, is tricky, and I'm not expecting you to do that on the project. So in order to make sure that this menu still functions properly, you're just going to have to go through and do it, right? You're just going to have to run through the menu and select the appropriate options and make sure that it still works. So, you would have to test it manually. I think the only other question that I might ask before submitting this to be pushed and merged would be, is this code here all right, or should I abstract this out into a function, or perhaps even multiple functions, right? Like, is it better to have this as part of a function, or is it okay to just leave this code right here inside of the if statement? I think that most people would probably just go ahead and leave this code right here in the if statement. But I think the author of the textbook, the Clean Code book, would probably make a pretty strong argument for abstracting this out into a function. And the reason why I think that, right, is if we look at this code and I go through and I see each of these options, I want to be able to quickly look at an option and know what it's doing, right? So can I figure out what this is doing based on looking at these 4 lines of code? Yes, I can. And it's not terribly complicated, right? But then consider, all right, what if I start filling out 4 lines of code for this option, 4 lines of code for this option, or maybe even more code? Some of these options might require a lot more code, right, than just a few lines. And it may not be as simple for me to look at that code and tell, what option I'm actually dealing with here. Contrast that with, if I abstract this out into a method, perhaps, right, which I've shown how to do in prior classes. I'm going to extract this out into a method. I'll call it add new quiz or something along those lines, right? Now when I look at this code, right, I see, oh, if they select option 1, we're adding a new quiz. Boom. Right? So it actually is a lot easier to understand at the cost of, moving this code a few sections down. I think, though, that there's maybe another issue that's worth considering here as well. A method should do one thing and do it well, right? But this method is dealing with user input, and it's creating a quiz object, and it's accessing this quiz manager thing, right? This is a little bit tricky from a design perspective, but where should the quiz actually be created? Should I really be creating this quiz right here? Is that really the best place to be creating this quiz? I don't know. I'm not necessarily convinced, right? Maybe the quiz manager should be creating this quiz. Maybe instead of passing in a fully formed object in this quiz manager, right? Maybe instead of this, I should have a method that takes in a string and constructs a new quiz using the quiz constructor and adds it to the list. Which approach is going to be better? This is something that I think we'll probably touch on a little bit in Wednesday's class because it really relates to objects to a big degree. So we'll probably touch on that a little bit on Wednesday's class, but it's something to think about, right? It's definitely something to think about and something to consider on your own projects. For now, though, I think I'll go ahead and leave it and finish this up. So let me run a status here. Gonna add. I want to add everything but the class files. So I'm just gonna go ahead and add everything here. I did have to make changes to the menu, right? I didn't make questions to these tests, but I'm gonna add it anyway, just so it shuts up about it. All right. Git push. Origin, add new quiz. Login credentials. I see a question in chat. 1 second. I'm almost done with this. Let me finish this up very quickly here, and then I will take a peek at that question. Because I'm getting close to 3:30, and so I am going to probably spend the last 15 minutes of class helping people out with stuff. So if you're here only for working on the Quizmaster stuff, I'm basically about done with the Quizmaster stuff. I'm going to submit this final pull request and call it a day on this app. So if you don't have any questions about the project or homework assignments, that's probably it for today. Enjoy the rest of your week. I'll see you back on Wednesday. So I am going to switch over and try to catch up with chat stuff now. If you have questions on homework assignments or projects or other stuff, sit tight. I'll get to you as soon as I can. Let me go back and check and see. Someone is asking, it says Java doesn't have any JRE system library in the assignment and is throwing errors at everything. Let me go open up that repo real quick and see if I can figure out what the deal is with that. Oops. And just pop this in. Wait, is this it right here? No, it's not. Is this it? No, it's not. All right, sorry. I'm just going to pop this into Eclipse real quick and see if I can figure out what the deal is. What? Whatever. That's fine. Sure. Oh, it says assignment 5. Great. Fantastic. All right. So it looks like I'm having an issue here as well. Let me see. I guess I set this project up wrong. My bad. Let me see if I can fix it real quick. So I'm going to open up the problems menu here and see if I can find out what the problem is. Unbound class path container. Okay, well, let's fix it. I'm going to right click on this. See, it's got the red exclamation point here. I assume yours probably looks similar as well. I right clicked the project and went to properties, and now I'm going to the build path. And I can see, here's my problem. It says, oh, I don't have Java 1.8, which is probably not a surprise. That's a very old version of Java. They're on, I don't know what version they're on now, but much higher than 8. So I screwed that up for sure. So on this libraries tab, I should be able to edit this and select from this drop-down menu and then click apply and close. And there's now errors in the code, right? But it's, you know, not the other stuff. Did you catch that, I hope? Right-click the project, go to properties, build path, libraries. If you see a red X here, hit this edit button and select the proper JDK from this dropdown. I only have one. That's okay, it works. I see more questions about the, oh, you got it working? Great, awesome. I see more questions about that git command. I mean, if we take a peek at, do I have any of the repos on here? I actually am not sure that I have any of the repos on here. Oh, I do have an Aquaman repo on here. That's one of them, right? Yeah, it is. So if we take a command, I mean, you should be testing the command here, right? You should not be running your script over and over and over again to test this stuff. You should be running this command here. We can see the log, right? If I take a look at the log, I can see that there's 2 commits here, right? And I can see which one I want to get. So you should be messing around with the command here and making sure that you get this command to work the way that you want to here before trying to put it into your script. So, you know, break it down into chunks. Make sure that it's working the way that you expect. Do I still have that Stack Overflow page open? I do. Right. First things first, run something like this and see if it, you know, tweak this to the values that you care about. So we care about 2020, 02, 04 at, I don't know what the due date is, 1500 or something. I don't remember, 1600. But for the sake of these commits, I'll pick a time that's in between, right? I'll pick a time that's in the middle, since that's you know, more accurate to what we are concerned about. And so when I run this command, right? When I run this command just like this, which commit do I get? I get this one. This is the last commit that exists before 1540 on this date. If I change this time so that it says 1550 instead, which commit do I get? I get the second one, right? I get the second one. The command works just fine. Just copy directly from Stack Overflow, change the date and time to match the date and time I cared about. Switch the branch to match the branch I care about. Worked like a charm. Pop that whole thing into backticks, feed it into the overall command, and you should be good to go. If anybody else has any questions, please let me know. Keith, I know you were in office hours earlier. I don't know if you had a question or not. Let me know if you want to unmute your mic, or if you need me to take a look at your code or something, I could hop into a breakout room with you for a minute if you want me to. I don't know if you got your problem resolved or not. Let me make a breakout room real quick, Keith, and I'll take a peek. 1 second. For the rest of you, if you have questions, I'll be back in just a moment. So if you have questions, stick around. I promise I will be back. Just give me a minute to go take a look at this. Mm-hmm.